Our next speaker is Glen Ford. He is the Executive Director of the Black Agenda Report and is co-host of the Black Agenda Radio.
Good afternoon and power to the people. Now, I found that in talks like this, at least I do better if I just focus on one point. So I want to discuss the past 40 years of mass black incarceration as the national policy of the United States. And when I say national policy, I mean mass black incarceration is the policy of every jurisdiction of our country, east and west and north and south and big city and rural. That is the national policy. We at Black Agenda Report have maintained that mass black incarceration is the greatest challenge and affront to black America because it mangles black internal social relations and impacts every aspect of black life. It settles like a cloud on everything that occurs in black America. I'm sure that others will go into detail, as the good doctor did, on the stats surrounding mass black incarceration. But for me, the most horrific number is that 1 out of every 8 prison inmates on the planet is an African American. 1 out of 8. And yet African Americans make up only about half of 1% of planet Earth's population. That statistic alone serves to illuminate who and what the United States is among the world community of nations. It illuminates its essential character as a society that is not just steeped in racism, but is largely organized around race and around racial oppression. That's what the vast African American gulag really means. That's what that number tells us. And although the left now puts mass black incarceration high up on the list of social ills, I think that this great scourge is still sort of compartmentalized rather than seen as central to how U.S. society has been structured over the last 40 years. Sarah Flanders put it perfectly this morning when she said that the Trayvon Martin murder flows from the racism that is at the very root of U.S. society. And yet, I don't think that most of us see mass black incarceration as the great malignancy that grows from the root racism of this society. Certainly, we don't see that kind of recognition among the black misleadership class, most of which seems to be more ashamed than outraged at mass black incarceration. And even on the left, we find that mass black incarceration is explained as an outgrowth of the national security industrial complex, or that it's a product of a strategy to control surplus workers. These are aspects of mass black incarceration in the United States, but that is not the central dynamic. The central dynamic is white supremacy. The most difficult fact to face for many progressives and for the black misleadership class is that mass black incarceration, as we have known it for the past 4 decades, is a general white response to the black freedom movement of the 60s. And even more broadly, it is a general white response to black assertions of full humanity in what most white people consider to be their national space. Now, the important words here are general white response, and by that I mean that masses of white people, large majorities, in every part of the country, whether those regions were heavily populated by black people or not, very quickly joined in damn near universal project to put black people under hyper-surveillance and behind bars, beginning in earnest in the late 60s and the early 70s. What was more striking than the eightfold increase in the overall incarcerated population since 1970 and the astronomical proportion of prisoners that were black, what is even more striking than that is the near uniformity of the spread of mass black incarceration across the country. It was not a southern phenomenon, it wasn't a big city phenomenon, but a general national phenomenon that swept every region and every state, and very, very quickly. The black American gulag stretches from sea to sea, and it got that way in the space of a very few short years. This is a prison regime that was put together, or at least vastly strengthened, with amazing speed and fantastic uniformity by local and by state governments and local and state police forces, consistent, and this is the important part, consistent with the demands of majorities of the white citizenry. It is absolutely true that a national political guiding hand was at work in instituting mass black incarceration as we know it. It was at work in orchestrating an hysteria around the so-called war on drugs. That's not debatable. And it's also true that the evolving national security state used that hysteria to tighten its social controls over American society as a whole, not just over black people. But white America was already hysterical about black people's perceived intrusions and violations of white social space. And that was before there was any declaration of a war on drugs by the federal government. If there was any phenomenon that was more swift, more striking, and more disruptive of American patterns of life than black mass incarceration has been, it was white flight from the cities. Much of urban America was deflated like a balloon in the early to late 60s, leaving behind a black core. White people back then, just as now, claimed that they were retreating in the face of crime, even though crime rates were far lower. And even though back in those days, in the mid-60s, 70% of the nation's prison inmates were white. It's roughly reverse that today. I believe that white America was primed for a massive lockdown of black people, and that was before Nixon's first war on drugs, before he initiated his Southern strategy, and before Nixon was even elected. All it took was an articulation of the code words, and the response was reflexive and breathtakingly fast, so that by 1970, we see the prison numbers begin to explode. We at Black Agenda Report like to say that mass black incarceration was white people's way of saying, okay, you black people refuse to stay in your place, so we've got a place for you, and that place is behind bars, or it's in the ground. So yes, the prison industrial complex has now been interwoven with the national economy, and it is vital to thousands of cities and towns, and it is a mainstay for millions of employees, but that's not the root of the dynamic. And it is true that the armies of black unemployed are largely controlled by the U.S. criminal justice system. And when they enter the prisons, they are no longer classified as unemployed. But prison populations keep growing no matter what the unemployment rate over these past 40 years. Up or down, the prison population is always up. It's declined slightly at state institutions very lately, but that's because the states have run out of money. But the federal prison system continues to grow because it is responding to that dynamic. The dynamic of mass black incarceration is disconnected from unemployment figures. It is disconnected from crime rates. That's because the primary dynamic is white racism. The white electorate in every region demanded mass black incarceration. This is, therefore, a mass white phenomenon, and a terrifyingly uniform one. It is considered, that is, mass incarceration is considered an intractable problem. But what is really intractable is white racism. Mass black incarceration may serve the 1%, but it was a punishment demanded by majorities of the white section of the 99%. Punishments against black people for the crime of asserting themselves as human beings. And this cannot be papered over by any organizations that seek human liberation. Power to the people.